Welcome to the American Dream Team podcast.
Hello and welcome to the American Dream Team podcast with experienced immigration attorney Ahmad Yakzan. Ahmad left Lebanon at age 18, dreaming of one day becoming an attorney. He faced many challenges but worked hard to achieve his goals and now has 4 degrees and U.S. citizenship. His passion is helping immigrants with all of their concerns, from green card application to deportation. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today's episode is Working from Anywhere, the New Landscape of Immigration. Ahmad, great to see you again.
Good to see you too. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so how has the rise of remote work influenced immigration policies and practices?
It has actually impacted it a lot, and I would get in that in a second. But it affected me because at our office, we moved some of our operations to be fully remote for my staff. So, of course, we take the right precautions and everything to make sure that everything is secure. But it has affected a lot of people. A lot of attorneys are actually working from home these days, which is okay. A lot of the hearings for immigration courts, for example, now allow for you to go virtually, to appear virtually on behalf of a client. So even in the practice of immigration law, the move to remote work has actually affected us a lot. You know, it helps with overhead and all of that stuff when it comes to immigration attorneys. About 90% of my consultations these days are actually online. I don't come to the office that often, and I work from home a lot of the time. The issue with immigration law is actually very interesting because immigration law itself is not built for remote work. And I say that about 2 things. Number one, in the middle of the pandemic, there were a lot of international students, for example, that were not able to go to their campus to take classes. And a lot of universities switched to online or virtual learning. And for a while, USCIS was saying, well, you're going to fall out of status if you actually do that, which was very unfair because it wasn't up to the student for them not to actually appear in person. It was a change by their university. So they had to adapt the law a little bit for them to actually be able to stay in status while attending virtually. And the second part of it that has actually changed a lot is when it comes to employment visas in the United States. For example, if you have an H-1B visa, that's a professional degree, and a lot of people actually end up getting an H-1B visa for them to end up getting a green card down the road. That's how I got my green card, and ultimately my citizenship is through an H-1B visa. Immigration law says that the employer that petitions for your visa, because you do need an employer for an H-1B, the employer needs to have control over you for you to be able to get that visa. And the law itself has actually changed to it. If you work remotely, it would be okay, but the employer has to actually assert some control over your work. And that's not really defined, but you have to have employer have some control over what you're doing. And that depends employer by employer. The last one actually, and the biggest effect that remote work has had is on labor certifications. So for example, I get hired by a company in North Carolina and I'm doing IP work for them, or I'm doing some sort of coding work for them when I'm in Florida and they're in North Carolina. And they're applying for your green card. And in order for them to get a green card for you, they have to test. In order for them to get a green card for you, they have to test the labor market. So the question then becomes, do they test the market in Florida or do they do it in North Carolina? So that's been really the issue. And if you actually pick Florida and then the headquarters is in North Carolina, it changes the money that you're going to get paid. The salary is going to change. It's going to change the advertising where the employer has to advertise for your job for you to get the labor certification. So it has had an immense effect on immigration law. Unfortunately, in the United States, we're a little behind the ball when it comes to big changes like that, when it comes to immigration law changes, but we're catching up.
You mentioned one visa category, but are there other categories that are particularly relevant for remote workers?
Yes, a lot of, as I said, anything that has to do with employment, like a J1 visa, for example. I have a client who does research for a university. You can't work remotely for that. You have to go to the lab and all of that stuff. But if they put you in for you to work part-time at home, and you live in another locality or another county or something like that, that's going to affect it. And I've had clients that actually USCIS harped on that when it comes to renewal. So anything that has to do with employment cases and an employment visa is going to have an issue. For example, if you have an E2 visa, and that's an investment visa that we've discussed before on the podcast. If you have a visa that and you apply for, I have a client right now, he applied for it like he's staying here in Tampa, Florida, but his business is virtual. He sells a lot online and he wants to move to New York, for example. Is that change material enough that he has to actually inform USCIS? Now, luckily, in the E2 arena, you can actually send a letter to immigration and ask them, do I need to change my filing to reflect the change or not? And they will give you an advisory opinion. But anything that has to have some sort of control by your employer will be affected if you work remotely. So if you are working remotely and you're on any sort of work visa in the United States, I would discuss it with your immigration attorney before you do it.
Okay. And what challenges do remote workers face when applying for a visa, especially when it comes to remote work?
As I mentioned before, their eligibility for the visa will be questioned.
Okay.
So in the old days, so let's put it this way. In the old days, recruiters used to hire a lot of people on H-1B visas. I had one of those clients before. Hire people on an H-1B visa and lease them to another employer. That was a huge issue for USCIS because they had to actually change the rules to say you cannot do that. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the IT industry got affected by it, and a lot of the people that were doing customer service work, for example, were not able to do that. But right now, as I said, if you are on a remote basis with your employer, you're going to have an issue. So, for example, if you you apply for an H-1B visa and say, well, I'm going to be working remotely, and that's actually one of the things that you have to disclose on the labor conditions application. And you're working remotely, you have to tell them the second address where you're working. And if your employer is not exerting enough control over you, or if you don't give them something to prove that the employer is going to have control over your work, they may not even approve the visa itself. Okay. So that's where the problem actually comes in. So for example, even if it comes to you getting your visa overseas and it's been approved here in the United States, but you leave the country and you have to stamp your visa on your passport, and the consular officer asks you, well, where are you going to work? Well, I'm going to work remotely from some sort of virtual office. They might actually deny issuing the visa for you. So even if it's been approved here in the United States, you might actually get denied overseas. So there are a lot of issues that you have to worry about if you are applying for a work visa and you're working remotely. And as I said, you need to discuss those before you spend all the money and your employer spends all that time and money to get you that visa.
Yeah. What legal considerations should employers keep in mind when hiring remote workers from other countries?
We're talking about people who are from outside the United States who come in on work visas for them to work here in the United States. You can hire remote workers and not apply for a visa for them anytime you want. I mean, that's what we do. If you are an employer and you come here you bring an employee here in the United States, or if they're here in the United States already, you have to worry about a bunch of laws. Immigration is one of them. As I said, you have to assert control over them. You have to pay the prevailing wage that's on the prevailing wage determination by the Department of Labor. So in order for you to get some visas, the E2 doesn't apply for that. And the H-1B, the prevailing wage determination has to be issued before you can actually hire the H-1B worker. So you can actually, if you don't pay them what the PWD says or the prevailing wage determination says, they're technically out of status. So you're going to be harming your employee. If you don't pay them, you might also fall under some Department of Justice rules when it comes to employment. It might actually put you in hot water with the Department of Labor because you're not honoring that prevailing wage determination that you signed as the employer. So these are some of the things that you have to worry about. The other thing that you have to worry about specifically to the H-1B is when you fire them, you actually have to send them home. You have to pay for them to go home. If you don't do that, you're also violating their rights. So there are things that are in the statute themselves that actually preserve the rights of the employees themselves under the visas.
A lot of companies are doing sort of a hybrid thing, sometimes in the office, sometimes remote. Does that change how the process works for immigrants, or is it does?
Well, it becomes like a totality of the circumstances kind of analysis. Is the person 90% under the microscope? Are they 100% under the microscope? Are they 50% getting controlled by the employer? So it's really going to depend on how much control the employer is asserting. Now, some big companies give you a laptop with software already loaded up on the laptop, and every single keystroke is actually tracked. Is that enough control? Probably. But again, it's going to be like a case-by-case analysis that you have to talk to an immigration attorney about.
Okay. The remote work thing obviously has changed dramatically in the last few years. What trends do you see emerging in immigration law related to remote work over the next few years?
Again, and I'm going to discuss it on both sides, on the practice side and the client side. On the practice side, immigration is actually moving a little slow to adapt some e-filing and all of that stuff, but we're moving in the right direction. When I started practicing 15 years ago, you had to submit everything by snail mail, and you have to do it that way. Now we're actually moving to where we can file some petitions online, and we're promised by USCIS that everything is going to be virtual very soon. And as I said earlier, we can actually appear via WebEx and immigration court. When it comes to the employer side or the visa side of things, I honestly don't know. It's going to be very interesting seeing the shift and where it's going to lead us. Especially, again, I can hire a virtual assistant to do everything I can do from overseas. The problem is these visas actually require you to be here in the United States for you to be able to get the visa. So are we going to see a shift towards more people hiring virtual assistants compared to physical employees that have to come into the office every single day? That is, we have to wait to see that. The last thing I say is Google and Microsoft and those big tech companies actually are the biggest recipients of H-1B visas, and we only have 85,000 visas. So if we start moving towards more of a remote work thing, if these companies start using less of those visas, we probably, other people or other employers will be able to get a bigger piece of the pie when it comes to the H-1B pot. So,
that's interesting. Yeah.
I'm hoping that that's what's going to happen. But Google and HP and Microsoft is actually requiring their people to come back to the office now. But we will see how it affects it.
Yeah, we'll see how long that lasts too, right?
Absolutely.
How might technological advancements impact visa processes for remote workers?
As I said, I alluded to that earlier. It's really helping a lot. Immigration has not incorporated everything technology-wise, has not incorporated everything, has not moved everything to an online filing system. We still have some things that we can file, some things that we cannot file yet. I think the next step that they're going to do is allow us to apply for a green card or the I-485 packets online now. So they're actually moving towards a more integrated technological thing for practitioners. But I think through this episode, we've been talking about how technological advances have moved at a pace faster than immigration law.
Mm-hmm.
So
technology moves faster than the government? That's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, you say you go on a dating website and you are quote unquote dating someone for 3 years by seeing them on FaceTime or seeing them on WhatsApp. Is that dating? In your mind, of course it is, right? Mm-hmm. The government doesn't believe so.
Yeah.
If you don't meet in person, it's going to be an issue.
Yeah.
So these are the things that the U.S. government has to catch up to in traditional and non-traditional relationships and technology and its effect on the law. All of these things we're seeing the progress and we're seeing how things are changing but unfortunately, they're changing at a very slow pace. So we have to see how the U.S. government actually deals with it.
Can you share an example of a successful immigration case involving remote work?
Yes, I do. I do have a client who sells prescriptions online, and they actually downgraded their office space, and their salesperson is actually working remotely now. And because they're working in the same municipality where we got the prevailing wage determination, and immigration didn't actually have an issue with it, and we listed that address on the prevailing wage determination, and it didn't actually have any issues on their visa, and it was issued. Because these are the things that as long as you're clear with immigration, and as long as you're clear with them about what you're doing and what's going to happen in the future, and you don't tell them, you don't tell them the truth. Once you actually lie to immigration, that's when you and your employee is going to be in trouble. But as long as you're being clear with them from the beginning, there is a legal way to get around almost everything. You just have to be truthful with them.
Good. That's a good tip. Be truthful and hire an immigration attorney. All right. Well, thanks for tuning into the American Dream Team podcast with experienced immigration attorney Ahmad Yakzan. To connect with Ahmad, head to AmericanDreamLawOffice.com and be sure to like and subscribe our channel and leave a review if you enjoyed what you heard. Ahmad, thanks so much for being here. We appreciate having you.
Thank you so much for having me, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.